And so we turned to my guys and I was like, hey, you know that idea we've been kind of playing around with about doing this management support company? Like, call someone. Let's call her, right? And we did. And the guy was, and we was just like, hey, can we have lunch? Can we talk to you about something?
No.
And it was fine. It was an easy phone call. But it seemed like such a big deal.
Yeah.
Right. That barrier is like, I don't want to do it. And it was like, no, just don't think about it. That's another philosophy. Like, I just don't think about things. I just do. I think that's the Joker.
Ready, fire, aim.
Huh? Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And so we did it. And then that night we went back to our hotel room and we all threw we threw together like a PowerPoint plan of, here's our business. Here's what we're going to do. Just on the hotel, we came up with the name, and then I'm following Grant Cardone. He's all about marketing and all stuff. So I walked out on the balcony. We had this beautiful view of Miami and the harbor and stuff. And I made this little video that I posted on my Facebook group that I had been consulting with all these guys. I was like, hey, here's this awesome opportunity I want to share with you guys, blah, 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 and did this really cool thing.
What the hell's going on out here?
Well, hey, getting right into it. I am Dr. James Taylor. This is another episode of Fueled by Spite. So as always, like, share, follow. This interview is the first of its kind in how it came up. So this is Blake Vaughn, local politician, and this is the first time we've met, but we've exchanged a little bit of back and forth on our local city Facebook group in North Richland Hills. He was the one always answering questions about garbage pickup, or can we have chickens, or what happened with the chickens, or hey, when are we going to talk about chicken? A lot of fucking chicken talk over the past 3 months. And just, I reached out, hey, I've got a local podcast. Do you want to be on it? He asked a couple of questions back and forth, and you, for all intents and purposes, agreed to it with a GIF of Borat going, very nice. So, all right, cool. I made a good decision asking this guy to come on. So, real quick, Blake, give us your origin story. Who are you? Aside from chicken talk, why are you here?
Whenever I get this kind of question, I like to start way back in like the 1950s. I know I wasn't born yet, but go with me. My mom and dad, they grew up in the projects of East Dallas, over where Baylor Hospital is right now. Dirt poor. Okay. My dad was actually in a bar fight with a friend of his. The friend stabbed someone, I believe murdered them, and he had to go to prison. And my dad was given the choice of going to the army or going to prison. And so he chose the army, right?
Fair.
He was about 19 years old at the time. Did the army for a little bit. He had to get out early because his parents had gotten sick, and there were siblings and all that. And so he got out, ended up getting married to my mom. She was 19 at the time, so right there, 20, 21, 19. And then he had to start raising his brothers and sisters because his parents passed away very early. And so he was kind of thrust into this responsibility, right? You need to either straighten up or your life is over.
Yep.
And so he was able to do that. He was able to come out. He started working with the post office, then he started his own company a few years after that. And over the next 26 years, he grew that company from nothing to maybe the equivalent of about $17 million a year in revenue. And so very successful.
Yeah.
And so I grew up for my maybe first 16 years living in that success, that financial success that he had. When he brought my lunch to school, he'd bring the whole class lunch, and we go on like vacations every other weekend, do all this fun stuff. And it was great. But by about the time I was age 16, he got distracted.
Ballpark, what year are we in?
This is about 2001.
Okay.
Recession hit right there, 9/11, all that stuff. About 16 for me, critical age. By the way, I was very introverted. Didn't have a lot of friends. I was maybe 220 and 5'4". My nickname was Oompa Loompa, not by choice. Okay.
Nicknames rarely are by choice.
Still scarred. No. And, but it was just like, I was just very closed off and introverted. And, my dad was an alcoholic, severe alcoholic. He drank about a fifth of gin every night. During that 16 years, I never saw my parents kiss. Every single night, I saw him verbally and emotionally abusive to her. Called her every name in the book. I mean, just the absolute worst stuff. I remember many times just like locking myself in my closet and crying and all this stuff as a kid. And at age 16, he got distracted by a lot of stuff outside of his business, right? Just doing things he shouldn't have been doing, outside of his marriage, long-term affair, and just kind of had a whole nother family basically that he had set up and he was funding. My mom was basically forced to
Make it sound like a business. He had set it up and was
yeah,
funding.
yeah. I mean, that's business,
Yeah.
very business minded. And my mom was, even though he was super successful at the time, he didn't let anyone into the financials of his business. So
Yeah.
no one really knew what was going on. My mom was basically forced to shop at Walmart and J.C. Penney. Great. That's how I grew up. But this other family, this other lady was shopping at Neiman Marcus and Saks Fifth Avenue.
Ooh.
Right. And, we find all this stuff out in the divorce is pretty stupid. But anyway, he got distracted and he ended up sending my mom divorce papers on their anniversary. Right. I remember the sheriff or the constable knocking on her door that night. And oh man, sorry, it's getting really deep. Sorry.
That's all right.
But it over the next year, he went from being super successful to losing absolutely everything. His business went through the ground.
Mhm.
He had put all his eggs in one basket, talking about chickens.
Nice. See
And
what you did there.
yeah, that one customer ended up moving out, and so it just kind of crushed his business. And then the recession hit, and so in that one year, he literally went from super successful to nothing, and it crushed him, and it crushed his identity as well because
Mhm.
he was built on this. I am a success. He spoke at all the association meetings. He, just very well respected,
Yeah.
more or less, right outside the family. And and
Important distinction.
yeah, just gonna put that in there. And yeah, it was bad. He ended up working like he didn't recover. His next few jobs was working as like a cashier at 7-Eleven
Mhm.
or the loss prevention guy at a Fiesta Mart.
Yeah.
His health was literally sucked out of him. I mean,
Yeah.
at 59 years old, he was very healthy. I mean, very healthy. Looked great and worked out and all this stuff. And over that next maybe 2 to 3 years, the best way I could describe him to you is the creature Gollum from Lord of the Rings. And he left my mom in a position where she hadn't worked in 14 years. And so the house ended up going into foreclosure. She couldn't afford it. She couldn't afford to put food on the table. It was very rough for a period of time. Luckily, we had some people kind of just surrounding us, helping us. I was in a Christian school, and we had people step in to help cover the tuition costs and all that. I had teachers who would kind of pray with me and stuff. And
Yeah.
just as I walked through that very hard time, I had a football coach who said, Blake, you're going to play football. I'm like, no, coach, I'm not that guy, right? I'm the opposite of a football player. He's like, nope, you're going to do it. And about 6 months later, I had lost 55 pounds, in which he did not want that.
Right.
It's like the opposite of what he
Yeah,
wanted.
fair.
And it just started to unlock my confidence as an individual, my self-esteem, all this sort of thing. And so by my senior year, it totally changed who I was. I think I was very confident, very driven.
Mhm.
I think the motivational force behind a lot of what I do is just this idea of not wanting my family to go through what I went through, right? And also trying to some maybe degree to get back what was lost
Yeah.
for our family, if that makes sense. Um, but it was very rough, and so I'm constantly kind of aware of what am I putting too much of my identity in my success, because I don't want that
'Cause
to
you
be
saw the
yeah,
downfall of
exactly,
that.
exactly. And so, I kind of hold my business and financial success or whatever with an open hand. If God wants to take that away tomorrow because He's got something else in plan, well, that I know that it's for my good, whatever it is. And so I just try to keep that as my driving force now. It's like, yes, I want to be successful. I want to give it everything I got. But to be open handed about it. I also wanted to go to the military. My dad was military. My brother's military. All my uncles were
Okay.
military. All that kind of stuff. And so I knew I wanted to serve. Maybe not a career, but I wanted to serve.
Right.
And so while I was waiting to get into the military through a commissioning program through the Officer Candidate School, I went ahead and finished my MBA in marketing. So I really enjoy it. I love the business aspect of it. Then I was able to go into the military. I made the mistake of, I was talking to my chief, my recruiter, and he said, you should go supply. You have your MBA. You should go into the business side of the military. And I was like, no, I want to do the real thing. It was interesting. I think my captain once said that 2% of what we do is freaking awesome. 98% of it is boring, right? So, and I did that for a few years. Was not for me. That was more of an engineering billet. That's not me.
Yeah.
I actually shifted over into public affairs before getting out, and I had a really great time doing that for about 7 months or so. I coordinated like an air show with the Blue Angels on the public affairs side, and did some other stuff with the local government officials and whatnot. And then I actually got married while I was in the military. She was a girl that I really liked in college, but the timing wasn't right. She
Mhm.
ended up getting married to another great guy. They had a kid together, and then he was diagnosed with leukemia. And so he actually passed away when he was 29 years old,
Oh man,
leaving her a single mom.
that's way early.
Yeah. And then so we reconnected after that. And about a couple of years later, we ended up getting married. And so I exited the military just to get back home with them, to be that father in the house or whatever. And that brought us back here. It's very hard for me to work for other people if if I'm not completely aligned with what they're doing. And if there's not that opportunity to really to make change, to create change when change needs to be made, it gets really frustrating for me. And so things don't really work out. And so
which means that you are in no way, shape, or form suited for corporate America.
Yes, well, exactly.
And in and of itself.
Yeah. So, about 13 months into that, I was like, this isn't going to work.
Or the military.
I need exactly. Right. See, you
It's
understand
all
me.
coming together.
Yeah. And so 13 months in, I talked to my a guy from that we were in a home group from church together, and I was like, hey, you know what? You hate your job, I hate my job. Why don't we start a business?
Right.
And so we did. We did really good. We made about I think $700,000 our first year as a franchise, and through untraditional, non-traditional methods of social media and digital marketing versus kind of going door to door with plumbers and that sort of thing. And that got us some recognition within our franchise, and we got some awards and whatnot. And then I said, well, hey, we're giving all this money. Like, we come in, we tear things out, but there's other people making money rebuilding it. And I was like, well, why don't we try doing that? And so we actually tried a flip house first, and I lost about $30,000 doing my first flip house.
Okay.
but I consider that tuition because we learned how to start remodeling, reconstruction, through those mistakes. And so out of that, we actually opened up the reconstruction remodeling side of our business, and that generated about $1.1 million additional revenue for us our second year. I was like, okay, this is really cool.
Yeah.
And then, I was a big Grant Cardone fan, and he says something called, commit first, figure it out later, I believe is how he describes it. And he says, if you don't know how to do something, like, just put yourself into the position of being forced to do it, burn the ships mentality. Right. And I remember one day I don't know if this is the right thing to do or not, but this is what happened. Someone called me. There was a big storm coming through and there's hail falling and all that. And they're like, hey, can you patch a roof? Like, can you tarp a roof? And I was like, yeah, we're on our way. And I hung up the phone and I turned to my partner. I'm like, okay, we need to learn how to tarp a roof really quick. Right. And so as we're driving in the van to, up north somewhere, he had YouTube open with a YouTube video, how to tarp a roof. Right.
Perfect.
And we're going to do it.
Yep.
And we had to stop, but we didn't have the stuff. So we had to stop at Home Depot on the way. It was fascinating. But out of that, we opened the roofing division of our company. So it was just kind of like these
necessity is the mother of invention.
Exactly.
I made a promise to somebody.
Yeah.
Cool. We have the necessity.
Exactly. And and of course we made mistakes along the way, but I think that's very important that we just understand that that's part of entrepreneurship. That's part of anything that you're doing is don't be afraid of making mistakes, right? You want to have a good quality product. I got super overwhelmed about 2020. About December 2019 into January 2020. And I remember we had adopted, and we had infant adoption. So I had like maybe 3 or 4 months of just not sleeping at all.
Yeah.
It was bad. And we have 2 other kids now as well. And so I was super stressed, overworked. Like, I loved what I was doing, but it was overwhelming what I was doing. And I remember I dropped my family off at church, and then I went and parked the car. And when I walked back in, my wife gave me the strangest question. She said, "Where's the baby?" Right?
That is an unexpected question.
And I'm just like, baby. Oh yeah, I left him in the car. Right? And that was an eye-opening moment to me. I mean, I was floored. I was like bawling and all this stuff, just stressed out. Right? And about maybe 4 or 5 weeks later, I'd sold my company. I sold my management company. I was like, I can't do it anymore. I sold it to my partners, just to focus on the one thing that I did really well.
Yeah.
And then like 2 weeks later, COVID hit. And so my delivery company is just very automated. I don't have to do anything.
Yep.
I just watch emails maybe. And so I was able to spend like that first year of COVID just hanging out at home. And then we did some traveling, hit national parks, and just it was like God orchestrated for me to step out of that thing that I was doing, which I enjoyed, but it was overwhelming, and prepared me to spend this next year and the first year of our infant's life, the new adoptee or whatever. And man, it's just been a beautiful experience to kind of walk through that.
I'd actually, I'm literally just getting back. I was at a mastermind this weekend. I was in
Nice.
In Nashville, Tennessee, and I was fortunate enough to be with Michael Chandler. And
Actually, I don't know. Who's that?
UFC. He's
Okay,
got the
gotcha.
fight coming up with Conor McGregor here in a couple
Oh,
months.
yeah, yeah. Oh, that'd be great.
Um,
Mhm.
so it was him, and then two of my coaches, Sean Dill and Lacey Book. One of the things that Chandler had said during the weekend, because I mean, obviously the mixed martial artist, the
Mhm.
combat athlete, if you
Mhm.
will,
Mhm.
is totally different in a totally different space than a
Mhm.
team athlete, than a football player,
Right.
basketball player. Personally, like I have a thing for rugby.
Mhm.
But again, a combat athlete is it's them and them alone,
Yeah.
and then who's ever the person across the cage.
Mhm.
And one of the things that so I wrote down a couple things you were saying. One of the things he said this weekend that kind of struck me, and I think you could probably speak to this really well. He goes, what makes people happy?
Mm.
Progress.
Mm.
So going off that route,
Sure.
and then at the same time, you took multiple leaps of faith.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll give you a really easy answer for that. I've actually, and I felt kind of bad about this. This dips back into my faith, if you will. And I've actually talked to my pastor about this because I feel kind of convicted over how I feel. But I have such confidence that that God will work all things out for my good and His glory, and that His providence is leading our steps, and even the mistakes that we make, He will turn them into our good, into something for our good. That I believe that if I'm pursuing Him and I'm wanting what's best, I'm going to make mistakes, but those mistakes are not going to kill me,
Mm-hmm.
right? Not eternally, right? And so there's a certain amount of power, for lack of a better word, that you have when you really come to grips with this idea of He's got me. And I could lose everything tomorrow, like everything, and I will be okay. And my family will be okay because there's some reason that that's happening, that He's allowing it to happen. Okay. So that is the how or the why I'm able to make some of those steps. And they're scary. Don't get me wrong.
Uh-huh.
There's anxiety in there, and it's like, oh my gosh, like, is this, with our building that we're doing, like, is this loan going to come through? If it doesn't come through, we've got $1 million in this project already, and what's going to happen? Oh my gosh. But there's still at underneath it all, there's a driving confidence that says it'll be all right. It'll be all right.
Yeah.
Right. And I would almost, you think about it from this perspective too. There is a preference that I would rather fail if it's for my greater good
Mm-hmm.
than getting what I want if it's going to take me away from what He has in store for me.
So I've also got a spiritual consultant, if you will.
Mhm.
The pastor that I speak with, I've done an episode with him. I'd recommend you go watch it. It's quite good.
I think I was actually watching that.
Oh,
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah.
So last week, so what he does is he sends me a passage.
Mhm.
He's like, hey, this is what we're going to talk about this week. And last week, he sent me James chapter 1, verses 2-4, which is, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, when you face trials of many kinds, because you know the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete.
Yeah, absolutely. You know,
And I say, if that's not literally what you were just talking about,
it
shit, I
it
don't know what
is.
is.
When you're in the middle of a crisis, you don't know why it's happening, right?
Fact.
You're like, what? I've done all these things right. Why is this happening to me now? I mean, think
Mm-hmm.
about my wife. She has always been in pursuit of like trying to be the best believer that she can be, follower of Christ, right? And yet, when she's in the middle of her husband having leukemia and she's a single mom, she's like, why is this happening?
Uh-huh.
Right. And that's a totally legitimate question. Everybody was going to face things like that.
Yep.
And yet, underneath it, you have to believe, if you have faith, right, that there is a purpose to this. You may not understand it, but when you're able to look back over time, you're going to see the things that are stringing together. And there are eternal priorities that are greater than our priorities that we have for our lives here.
Mm-hmm.
And so just making sure that we have the right that we're stacking that correctly, if that makes sense. I looked back and, like, why was it so hard for me? Why did I have to walk through this abusive father, not to me necessarily, but
Yeah.
toward my mom, and to see that just a wrecked relationship and abandonment and neglect
Well, to
and
be in the presence of abuse is still abuse.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. I never thought about neglect as abuse or abandonment. Like it is, though. It's
Yeah.
emotional abuse and whatnot. Anyway, so why did I have to walk through it? Why do we have to walk? Like there was a very short period of time where I was homeless. I had to go live with an uncle because
Hmm.
I had nowhere else to go, and it was crazy. And my mom, like, just so much stress that she was under, and I would see it physically, play out and whatnot. And yet I almost feel like it, looking back, I'm like, that was preparing me for some really hard times. And I remember at one point in the military, I was having a very bad time in the military. I was just not a fit for it.
Yeah.
There are some people, man, they are built for the military, and
You're not one of them?
I'm not one of them, and we need those people like at the forefront, right?
Yep.
But I remember I was sitting on the side of a bridge wing one time. We're out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and man, I was like at my bottom, rock bottom. And I had a lieutenant come up to me, great guy, and he shared a scripture with me. I'm sorry, I don't want to make this all about faith or whatnot, but this is important to me.
So I didn't have any
Um,
intention of doing that either. Yet here we are. So
yeah, yeah, right. He shared a scripture with me, which to this day, I see it. I have it everywhere. I have like a plate in my office with it. I have a picture of the storm, but he said, it's in Exodus. He says, "The Lord your God will fight for you. You need only be still." Right. So once again, having comfort in the fact that the battle is not yours. Yeah, you're doing these things, but yeah, there's just story after story in the Bible of like people that are trapped in crisis, not understanding what's happening, and yet then seeing how God was orchestrating things to do something even greater with them. You can look at Joseph, you can look at Moses, you can look at any number of people. And so I look back in my life and I see crisis after crisis after crisis of frustration, difficulty, obstacles, and yet becoming stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. And I don't know what's in store for me going forward, but I'm glad that I was able to walk through these things even though they were painful, because I know there's something that he's doing,
right.
and I'm looking forward to what that might be.
Can you, by chance, pinpoint the time when there was a fork in the road, if you
Mhm.
will? You were at a crisis, and you're like, "Hey, I'm gonna keep moving forward," or "Fuck it, let's just let it take me and see what happens."
Oh gosh, I mean,
Because I mean, it's one of those things where you have to build that muscle,
mhm.
right? When was a really crude example? When was the first time you were given the opportunity to exercise that muscle, and what made you decide to exercise it versus letting the situation take you and unfold as it was?
I think just the starting of a business is very difficult, right?
Fact.
And and I've done it about 7 times now.
Gross.
And and it has been gross for most of those. Like, okay, let me, if I can flip it and give you kind of the bad side, I guess,
That's
first.
fair.
I tried starting a FedEx business. I tried starting a trucking business. And it was miserable, miserable. And I was months into these 2 different operations, 2 different businesses, and I remember getting months and months into it, and it just being more and more depressed. Like physically, emotionally, I would start getting more and more depressed
Mhm.
versus kind of being invigorated by it. Like,
Right.
you know what I mean? Sometimes business is like, this is awesome. Like it's
Yeah.
bringing me life,
I will
right?
put in a 12, 14, 16-hour
Exactly.
day. This is
My
fun.
consulting, love it. The
Yep.
management company,
We're making progress.
we're making
Yep,
progress.
stuff is
Absolutely. You're
happening.
seeing things. And then other things, my FedEx company, we started that company right as the Great Resignation was starting. Okay. And I remember it was a few months into this, and we just weren't. I'd been successful starting a logistics company before,
Mhm.
wildly successful. I know how to do it, right? And then I was doing the same thing again, but it wasn't having the same results. And I remember I got a call from one of the FedEx managers. FedEx is a terrible company. I'm going to put that on the record. Okay. I got a call from one of these FedEx managers, and this dude starts screaming at me over the phone. It's like a regional manager with FedEx. You worthless, piece of crap. I thought you knew what you were doing. How come you don't? And I'm just looking at him like, am I in the military again? Right? Gosh,
Flashbacks, got some
yeah.
PTSD.
I was like, I'm sorry. Did you? I told him this. I was like, did you call
PTSD is
just
not
to?
a joke.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. I was like, "Did you call just to yell at me, or did you want me to talk in this conversation?" Right? And he kind of shut up. He realized what was happening and all this stuff. And I told him, I'm like, something is happening in the market right now, and I know you don't realize it. You guys aren't feeling it, but I'm telling you, there's something happening. This is before anybody talked about Great Resignation. This
Uh-huh.
is maybe I want to say March or so, 2021. Um, and and anyway, I ended up basically getting to the point where I'm like, no, this is a fork in the road. I got to shut this thing down.
Yep.
And so I fire sold it. I've fire sold maybe 3 businesses. Where I'm like, they aren't working. I'm not going to waste my time investing my energy into this if I don't see a clear path of how we're going to achieve that next level. And then, about 2 or 3 months later, you started seeing all the articles pour out about there's this thing happening called the Great Resignation.
Yep.
People aren't wanting to work anymore. And I'm like, I feel totally justified in where I am. And keep in mind, I had other businesses going at the same time already.
Mhm.
So I didn't need this
Yeah,
business.
this wasn't the end all be all. This wasn't your one
Right.
thing.
I'm going to pull back here and invest. This is Sun Tzu, Art of War.
Yep.
The general who has an army everywhere has an army nowhere. And so making sure that we don't overextend and then we're not really good at anything that we're doing,
Yeah.
and in the military, I was actually trained to do that. We were called
To overextend and be not good at anything.
exactly. We were called a jack of all trades, but a master of none.
Yep.
Right. And the idea there is you learn a little bit about everything. So one day you can command a ship and have a decent understanding of how all of it works. Whatever. And so that's what I did. I would pull out from those things. And so we were at this 10X conference, Grant Cardone fakes coming in from a parachute, into the stadium. I don't believe it was him anyway. And he put us on the spot one time. He said, hey, pull out your phone. And that, I don't remember exactly how I said it, but basically it's like that business deal, that thing that you've been wanting to do that you're just too scared to pull the trigger. Pull out your phone and call that person right now. Call that potential customer or that first whatever,
Yep.
and do it right now, like right now. And 30,000 people in the stadium, and so we turned to my guys and I was like, hey, that idea we've been kind of playing around with about doing this management support company, like call someone. Let's call her, right? And we did, and the guy was, and we was just like, hey, can we have lunch? Can we talk to you about something?
Yep.
And it was fine. It was an easy phone call, but it seemed like such a big deal,
Yeah.
right? That Barry is like, I don't want to do it, and it was like, no, just don't think about it. That's another philosophy. Like, I just don't think about things. I
Yep.
just do. I think that's the Joker. Dark
Ready,
Knight.
fire, aim.
Huh? Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so we did it, and then that night we went back to our hotel room and we all threw we threw together like a PowerPoint plan of here's our business, here's what we're gonna do. Just on the hotel, we came up with the name, and then I'm following Grant Cardone. He's all about marketing and all stuff. So I walked out on the balcony. We had this beautiful view of Miami and the harbor and stuff. And I made this little video that I posted on my Facebook group that I had been consulting with all these guys. I was like, hey, here's this awesome opportunity I want to share with you guys, blah, 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 and did this really cool thing. And then we went and rented another person who was at that conference said, they rented a Learjet. Like they used their entire annual marketing budget for a Learjet.
Yep.
And then they invited 2 celebrities to come on. So it was the burn the ships mentality.
Yep.
Like this is everything or nothing. And I kind of did the same thing. We rented a yacht, a sport yacht. And we said, hey, we're going to have some food and spread. We're going to do a nighttime tour of Miami. We want some of you owners to come over here and just hang out with us or whatever. And anyway, it was like such a cool experience we went there with no intention of doing this. And then after that, like 3-day conference, we started a new business and it just skyrocketed. I mean, and they're still operating today. I moved on, like I said before, but they're still operating today. It's been a few years now, and it's just cool to be a part of that.
It's interesting because a couple of things you've said, maybe not outright, but a couple of times. One of the previous episodes, I interviewed a local MMA guy, and I'm like, dude, like, and I've known him for a decade. I was like, why do you do this? I have, James Taylor, I have no desire to get into a ring and potentially, or give someone the opportunity to punch me in the face. But, if I win, I could see how that would, maybe propel me forward. I'm like, why do you do it? Or what kept you going? Almost kind of the same question I had here. He's like, evidence. It's like, and he just shut up. It's like, what a wonderfully, this is not a shot at you. What a wonderfully succinct answer. Like, it's just evidence. Like when I did it once, and then I could realize I could do it again, and I could do it again. So it's the same kind of thing. Like,
I like that.
What kept you going? You're like, evidence, basically. Like, again, this is in no way, shape, or form went to plan, such as business. But man, I like where this went. So again, I gave you the questions beforehand. We didn't touch on a single one of them. I'm okay with that. But what I want to do, I got a couple of rapid fire ones here. Just first, top mind thing. Is there anyone that you would like to trade places with for a day?
Probably Elon Musk.
Oh, dude.
Do I get his brain?
I was
if
gonna say,
switch?
I would like to do that just so I could see what he thinks
Yes.
like.
Yeah. I don't want to be me in his position. I want to be him
Yeah.
in that position.
But with my
Yeah.
with my conscience, not my knowledge, but
Yes.
my conscience.
Yes, exactly.
So there's a day, 24 hours, on hour 24:30, I was like,
Yeah.
man, like
And if I can't, like, it's the idea of someone who is so innovative and also doesn't give a crap. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to do this because I think this is what is best,
yep.
and I'm not afraid of the people who are against that.
Yeah,
Right?
his
To drive forward.
conviction.
Right. And you may not like everything that he does,
No.
but who does that like he does that?
Yeah. What's your guilty pleasure?
Man, it's probably eating. Like, I'm not supposed to. I've been on a diet for about 26 years now, and I'm still trying to work on it.
Fair.
I try to eat healthy, whatever this nasty mud water looks
Uh-huh.
like, green stuff. But yeah, it's desserts, and that's been such a struggle for me. That it's funny because you need a lot of self-confidence, or what is it called?
Discipline.
Like, discipline for other things, for business.
Uh-huh.
But man, I just suck at it when it comes to food.
Worst advice you've ever gotten?
Okay, you need to move on. I waited on my wife 7 years. hmm
That's awesome.
Mhm.
What's an idea that you think most people get wrong?
Most people get wrong.
Yeah.
Their motivation for life.
Okay, expand upon that.
Sure. I think there's, especially, I talk about Grant Cardone and a lot of people in success culture, right? Um, it's the idea of, I just need to put my head down and work harder, right?
Mhm.
And I don't think that should not be the driving force. Yes, you need to work harder. Yes, you need to give it everything. You need to lay everything on the line,
Yep.
right? Absolutely. But when that begins to impact the other things in life that are important, like your family, like your physical health, like your emotional health, like your spiritual health, all these
Mhm.
sort of things, that's where I think a lot of people get mad, especially this younger generation. They're like, no, I'm going to go after it, right? Well, maybe not this generation. The one right before it, this generation's screwed.
You're
But
not
the one right
wrong.
before it is like, I'm going to burn the candle on both ends and all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff, and make as much money as I possibly can. And it's like, no, screw that. It's not about making the most money you possibly can. It's about experiencing life and having an impact on life that you can leave behind. So
Mhm.
I don't know. That's probably what I think.
I like that. I mean, that
Mhm.
that's where I am personally. Like that's where I was. Hey,
Mhm.
I work 16 hours a day. You don't
Mhm.
do that.
Mhm.
And again, going back to the thing I was at this weekend, Sean Dill, one of the guys I was helping,
Mhm.
run it and MC it. He's like, I used to be that guy too. I
Mhm.
work 16 hours a day. And he's like, but now you take my hour and take your hour, and I can guarantee I have a more productive hour
Mhm.
than you do. And then I don't have to work 16 hours a day. It's like,
My business partner, who one of my former business partners, who we got in a fight, and then we've kind of made up and all that stuff since. But he gave me one of the best pieces of advice. I've told him this because I wanted to know, like, it was, as far as what's more important, make a lot of money now, like store it up so that you can retire okay later.
mm-hmm.
But he said, no, why don't you enjoy life now while you're young, and you can enjoy all of these things, right? That and it's not sacrificing your future, but it's like, don't sacrifice the present for the future, which I know is a very common way to look at it. But
Yeah.
you have to be I don't know what it was, how you do that, right? Yes, you need to plan for the future and stuff, but it's, don't sacrifice the present. Like, take advantage of the present that you're living in, but be prepared for the future.
Mm-hmm.
Store up for the future, but do that right. Don't sacrifice too much here. Does that make sense?
Oh, 100%.
He said it a lot better than I said it,
That'll happen.
but it stuck with me, and that's what I did. I gave up some opportunities to store up for the future, and I took more advantage of, like, what we're doing now. We travel a lot more now, because I want to do that when my kids are young. I don't
Yeah.
want to wait till my kids are gone and then start traveling.
You've touched on a couple of people, but what are you reading? What are you listening to?
So I've just started a book called Knowing God. What I'm trying to do, on my faith side, which I'm trying to invest more time in right
Mhm.
now, is get back to. I started seminary in January last year.
No way.
Because I thought I was going to do an MDiv, Master of Divinity or
Okay.
something. And I made it about 5 weeks in before I said, "What were you thinking?" And I cut the cord. I was like, "No, this is not the time for me
Yeah.
to learn Greek and Hebrew."
Fair.
And I've got 3 kids at home. But I do want to get back in touch with like the people who are a lot smarter than most of us are today. Hundreds of years ago, especially with church history, you've got thousands of years of people who have been thinking about these big questions and threshing through them, right? So that's where I'm trying to focus more of my time in reading. And then I've just got some books that I tend to go back and forth with, and share a lot with other people. Most impactful books I've ever had were How to Win Friends and Influence People,
Mhm.
Dale Carnegie, Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, Stephen Covey, 7 Habits or whatever, Highly Effective People.
Yep.
These are impactful books. I don't agree with everything in them, but there's golden nuggets in all of these things that I think people
Wait,
need.
you can learn from somebody or
Mhm.
something without agreeing with 100% of the stuff they say or write?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Wild
That doesn't
fucking
mean just
concept.
throw them out, right?
What a wild concept.
Yeah.
If I could add one to your list, if you
Great.
haven't already, The Wealthy Gardener.
I have not.
It's,
I've heard of it.
shit, dude. It's
Mhm.
fantastic. Actually, yeah.
You can give me a
It's-
copy when I leave?
Yeah, I might. I think I got an extra one around here.
Gotcha.
No, absolutely. Yes, I will. Because I literally, I bought the book a dozen times to give it away. So if I've got one here, it's yours. But it is wonderful.
Mhm.
Is there a place people can find you? They want to look you up, follow you. And
I don't know if you want to follow me. I mean, I have my political page.
Uh-huh.
It's Blake Vaughn, Associate Mayor Pro Tem. That's like third in line.
I
just a
remember
made-up
it being a
title.
very long title.
Yeah, it's a made-up title. It's like during COVID, if
Right.
the 3 other guys die, then it goes to me.
Assistant to the
yeah.
general manager.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah, exactly.
Perfect. Well, dude, I mean, this is again has gone in no way, shape, or form to plan. But fuck, I had fun, man. This was cool.
I had
Like
fun
this
too.
was a good time. As always, you will learn more here by accident than elsewhere by design. Fueled by spite. Blake Vaughn, appreciate your time, man.
Pleasure.